Okay, so yes, just quickly I will talk about just the whiskey industry itself. Whiskey as an asset. Why investors use and invest in Whiskey Invest Direct, and then how does it work? Okay. So the Scotch whiskey industry facts. So it's whiskey is the largest spirit category. In 2019, whiskey in the UK exported 4.9 billion pounds worth of whiskey. And in 2019, there was growth of 4% from the previous year. So the average growth per year has been 1.5% over the last 30 years. So the whiskey process itself, effectively, I've broken it down to a very simple format. Of course, it is a little bit more complicated than just making beer, but effectively you make beer. So you start with that same process, and then you boil, and we capture the vapor, and then it's matured in used oak barrels. And it must be matured in Scotland in barrels, and then it must be for a minimum of 3 years with a minimum 40% ABV in the barrel before it can be legally called Scotch whisky. Obviously, the 3 years is a minimum. You're obviously going to see as much as 5, 8, 12, even 20-year Scotches. Obviously, the older ones are usually single malts. Whiskey as an asset. Whiskey investing in maturing Scotch versus the FTSE 100, so the London Stock Exchange or London property over the past decade. We obviously investing in Scotch has been much higher than obviously the FTSE and the London property market. We use those because those are two, particularly the London property market has been exceptionally important and growing very quickly over the last 10 years. But then you compare it against something like Scotch, and it's Scotch is obviously doing exceptionally well. Okay, so just getting started on Whiskey Invest Direct. So it was the brainchild of Paul Tustane and Rupert Patrick. So Paul is an entrepreneur and started the company Bullion Vault. That is our sister company. And a lot of the development, the original development, we used obviously our learning and trading from what we learned from Bullion Vault. So the business started 5 years ago, and Rupert, who's has 30 years experience in the whiskey industry, so worked for Diageo with Jim Beam and Lafroig and so forth. So he came with a lot of experience both in the whiskey industry. Where Paul came with the experience of obviously the Bullion Vault side of the business and the opportunity, and seeing that there was an opportunity to get involved in maturing Scotch. So we used the same technology as Bullion Vault and married it with what was at the time an uninvestable asset that was the wholesale maturing whiskey market. So the important thing about our business is we are not a cask investment company. We are not a whiskey malt bottle investment company. We invest in bulk maturing whiskey. Okay, so before Whiskey Invest Direct, only distillers and other industry participants could trade maturing whiskey and benefit from those. And now, obviously, private investors can buy and sell maturing whiskey on the same platform. And we have a live platform that's running 24/7. So it's the same platform as professional participants like distillers and blenders, bottlers, bonding agents, and so forth can come and look and buy whiskey off our platform. And while benefiting, investors can also, obviously, we're supporting the distillers themselves. So we help that by freeing up their working capital. And it also helps with ongoing income and revenue for them, because our investors and ourselves, we pay for storage fees for those for that whiskey that's sitting in their warehouses.
Mm-hmm. Anthony,
yes.
So you said you started with Bullion Vault, so it's the same back end then, like in Bullion Vault, because I think some of our clients, they also have an account with Bullion Vault to invest in precious metals. So it's the same platform or back end.
We have two separate platforms we run, but our investors will see the similarities between the two of them because the Whisky Invest platform is based around the bullion vault model, but we run two separate platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. But absolutely, when investors go on from Bullion Vault and then go to our platform, go to our live trading board, they'll definitely see it and go, okay, this looks familiar. So Whisky Invest Direct, obviously, we give private investors access to the wholesale maturing market. There's trusted technology from our sister company that has over 2 billion of precious metals and 85,000 customers. We give complete transparency to both the investors and also the distillers that sell us and hold the whiskey for us. And we are HMRC, so the tax office. So we're HMRC approved through the Scotch whisky industry, and we obviously hold very important about the security that our investors have and ownership of the whiskey. And it's our whiskey itself. So we don't take the whiskey, we don't move the whiskey from the distiller. It sits in there, the same bonded warehouse as all the other different warehouses and the distilling industry itself. Okay.
Okay. How do we make sure that there's really this Scotch there in their facilities? Do we make audits with them or?
Yes, so we have to do obviously a yearly audit as part of HMRC, but I think the important bit is that we do our own audit. So every month the audit sits on is on the website, and then also as a client you have a username that's a private username, and so all your whiskey is on that audit. Secondly, this whiskey is a massive income earner for the British government, so they track it very, very closely. So it's very unlikely, if not impossible, to pull the wool over the eyes of the UK tax office. So they know every bit of whiskey. So we can't sort of say, well, there's whiskey and then there's not, because we're going to have to pay. Someone's going to have to pay the tax for it.
Okay.
So that means that it's very regulated for the government.
It's very, very closely regulated by the government. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Because it's such a big tax earner for them. The amount of duties and taxes and VAT and so forth, the industry, everything has to be very obviously legitimate and very transparent.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So attached is a screenshot of our live order board. So effectively, if we start, I won't go through all of them, but effectively what we're looking at here is we're looking at a grain distillery, Cameron Ridge, which is a 2018 Q4. So you've got your sell and your buy prices on both sides there, and you've got a spread, quite a short spread of 4p. On the 2018 Q4, someone's offering to sell at 127, 3,297 LPA, which is liters, and another person is obviously wanting to sell at 128. So it's a very simple, easy to read, easy to decipher for investors to buy and sell.
It looks very similar to the order board from Bullion Vault. I am
exactly
myself. Yeah. I am an investor in Bullion Vault, so I have used the platform already a lot of times. Yeah. So it's very similar. It's almost the same.
Exactly. And I think that the main reason it is similar is because it works so well. It's very simple, very simple, very easy to read.
Yeah, that's true. I haven't had any issues until now, and have been 3 years investing there. So
very good. Here's just an example of some of the screens of the whiskies that we have on. So this is when you click on the whiskey, up comes a screen that shows the performance of the whiskey but between when we first put it on the platform. So since the third quarter of 2017 until the 10th of August this month, you'll see that the prices are relatively consistent and have been until the beginning of this year. So at the end of February and through March, we obviously saw obviously the beginning of COVID-19, and we saw quite a large effect on the pricing of whiskey, because we had investors that started selling their whiskey, and like any buy sell, the more people buy, obviously the price goes up. The more people sell, the price goes down. So we saw quite a big fluctuation during that period, and then we saw obviously the whiskey then recover through late March and then through to May.
That's very interesting that there are so many people still afraid during the COVID crash,
Yes.
Corona crash, that they also sold so much whiskey. And
Yes.
do you think it has also to do, because you said that there's also big companies like bottlers or something like that who can also trade on this platform? So do you think it was mainly by big commercial investors who just sold their stocks, or is it more that because I think you have like statistics about that, or is it private investors who just try to get rid of their investment?
It was all private investors. So we don't we have commercial buyers that come in and buy the whiskey from us, from our investors, but we don't have any institutions that are investors in the business itself. So we are purely for retail private investors. And what we saw, it actually began, because I know the date very well. It was the 28th of February when we started seeing that investors sell off, and the initial feeling was that the investors were getting into cash, and they were concerned about the stock market. They were concerned about holding any assets at the time. And then what we saw then in March, which was interesting, is that we then saw some of our larger investors, once the price went down, we then saw some of our larger investors come back in. And it was a point, I suppose, called of price discovery, where we got to a point where investors started coming back in again. And that's where we saw the recovery begin.
Okay.
Yes, I can imagine also that it's not only that you are afraid of what is going on, but also that you need probably liquidity. Yes, if you are investing in like you say, in the stock markets, and there is a big crash, maybe you have to cover for that losses. So
yeah, I mean, look, it's a very
other assets, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer, because every individual and every investor has a different reason, you know. Yeah. So there was not one particular reason why investors were getting out. You know, the main thing that we saw was investors worried about the stock market, worried about their investments. They were getting out of the stock market and getting out of all their assets in the short term, you know.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. No, but very interesting to see that it's like such a good recovery already. So it's like, I mean, the prices are higher than before, right?
They are. I mean, look, we would prefer that March didn't happen, of course. It would look much better without a massive dip in the pricing. But the reality was that we did have investors selling out. So, but as you say, the crucial bit and the pleasing bit was how quickly everything recovered and went back into growth again.
Mm. So, and if I want to invest now in this, just to explain it a little bit more to the viewers also. So, if I want to invest now, it's like. Now, if I understand it right, this chart, there's a 3 years old whiskey, right?
Yes.
So, and I could always invest during these different stages. So now, for example, this 3 year old, if I would make the buying order, I would buy this in 3 years old whiskey, and then would just hope that the price will rise over the next years when it's like 4 years old, 5 years or something like that. And then I could sell it on this platform again, right?
Yes, exactly. So if you purchased a 2013 whiskey, it's obviously going to be more expensive than a 2017. But then again, something like the 2019 is going to be cheaper again. But so you're going to be able to get in at a lower price. But then obviously we always recommend that this is a long term. This is medium to long term investment. It's not a getting in and getting out in sort of a couple of months. Because you're not going to get the gains that you require in the short term, because you do have to pay obviously commission fees, and so as the whiskey gets better, and obviously your gains are then getting better as well.
Yeah,
that's true.
Okay.
I'm just a couple of pages here, just about the different whiskies. Obviously, we have on. So this is a Glen Spey, which is again a 2017 Q3. It's a malt rather than a grain. The last one, Cameron Ridge, is a grain. So this is a malt whiskey that we have. So you'll see a big difference. I'm going to go back to the previous page. So this is a Q3 2017 malt, and the price is $3.89 versus a grain that's again it's a Q3 2017, and the price is $1.51. So it's quite a big difference in the price. Our grains, on average, usually they usually go up on the platform at just over £1.
Okay. So why is it like that? Can you explain? Is it like because of a brand, of a manufacturer, or what is it exactly?
No,
because maybe
it's
not
more
everybody knows
the value
about
of malt versus grain. So the grain pricing is traditionally much lower than malt pricing. You see it when you buy a single malt whiskey versus a blend. So the grains go into blends and so forth. So you really see a different pricing. And for us, it's much cheaper for us to buy our grains than it is for us to buy malts. Malts on average, we put them on the platform at around it does depend on the manufacturer, but we usually launch around 276. Some of the larger companies like Diageo, so Diageo owns Cameron Ridge, and then some of the smaller companies that simply don't have the economies of scale of a company the size of Diageo. It's more expensive for us to buy the whiskey, and therefore more expensive for the investors. But if they're a small boutique company, sometimes there's benefits there for investors that they're going to grow. They're going to grow quicker because they're smaller than a Diageo, so that the whiskey is then going to be sold much quicker. So more supply and demand type thing.
Do you have in the platform information about all these different suppliers and producers, so that the people can decide in which whiskey is better to invest or not?
Yes, we do. So on the platform, when you press on the different types of whiskies, you can find some history and some knowledge about the whiskey itself. We've also in the information section on the website, there's also all the different distilleries that we buy off. Though, like anything, go to Google or whatever search engine you use, and do some research on the whiskey and the companies themselves, and that's where the best information is. Our website, we give information, but it's very clear and concise and transparent. But we're not there to make the decision for you. We always recommend go to Google, search what the best ones are to look at, and make the decision based on that.
Understand.
Okay, so the third one's a Blair Athol that I'm just showing again. It's a Q3 2017, slightly higher price than the Glen Spey, which was the previous page, but a very similar process. That we had some initial peaks in demand over supply when we first launched the whiskey. And then obviously we had the fluctuations happening in February, March of this year, and then the recovery. Okay, so security. Just on, we do get lots of questions on the platform and the website on how secure their people's investment is, and obviously their whiskey. So where's the whiskey stored? So the whiskey is stored in the same warehouse where we've purchased it from. Even when you buy and sell the whiskey, it remains in the same warehouse. It doesn't ever move. The only time it would move at the end of the process is at some time in the future. We might have a company come and buy it off us, or buy it off our investors, and they want to use it to put into a malt or a blend, and then that's the time when we would ask our investors if they want to sell that whiskey, and then it would move at the end. So the second question is just around proof of ownership of the whiskey. So when you buy a whiskey, you receive a contract of the purchase, and you can compare the cask list from the audit that's produced every month from the website. So you can see that it actually exists. So is the whiskey insured? Yes, and we've got evidence again on the website of our insurance company and our insurance process. We actually use Allianz. That's our insurance company for all the whiskies, and that insurance cost sits inside of the custody charge that we you'll see in a couple of in some future pages. You'll see the custody charge and commission charges for our that we charge the investors. is the money safe? So we can confirm the cashless bank statements for which would obviously Whisky Invest Direct we publish regularly, and exactly to what the Wood customers' records show. Okay, if I take my money out of Whisky Invest Direct, how long does it take? Well, it's immediate. So you can withdraw your money at any time. It depends on if you're using a currency, a conversion company like a TransferWise or a Revolut. Obviously, sometimes it does take longer to get your money back, but you'll see in the balance when you do sell whiskey that you immediately have cash available to decide on whether you want to invest in more whiskey or take out of your account.
So that means,
yes.
Anthony, that means because you were talking about that that of course is this kind of investment is more mid or long term, but
yes.
anyway, you are not locked up in time. I mean, you have your funds always available. I mean, you can always
exactly. You are not locked into any time schedule. If you want to buy tomorrow and sell the day after, you're absolutely. Everyone has the ability to do that, and I suppose that's when we sort of say you can absolutely do that. But if you want to make a return on your investment, you're not going to make short-term gains based on that.
Yes, of course. But I was only asking because there are some, of course, investors who always look for liquidity or to have the opportunity or the option to liquidate their positions just in case if something happened that is unexpected and you need the money, so you can just get out even if you take a bit losses.
Exactly. I mean, look, in the end, there's got to be a buyer that wants to buy the whiskey off an investor. So you may have to lower your price to find a buyer, but liquidity can be got immediately.
Yeah. Okay.
And what regulatory authority governs WID? So we're regulated under English law. So we've been approved by the HMRC, so the tax office, as the owner of excise goods stored in warehouses in the UK. Some more FAQs that we've got from past investor presentations. So the first one would be, do I own the whiskey? Yes, and the ownership of the whiskey is outright to the investor. The whiskey is not subject to any trust deeds or anyone's liability. Quite simply, it's your property from the moment you buy it to the moment you sell. Where is the whiskey stored? I went through this obviously earlier slides, but it's stored in bonded warehouses used by the Scotch whisky industry. So we have around 40 different warehouses our whiskey is sitting in right now. Again, that's all in the audit that you'll see that we do on a monthly basis on the different warehouses the whiskies are stored at around Scotland. And when you buy the whiskey, it's already sitting in a warehouse, and the whiskey is insured and does not move. How do I check the records?
Is it this whiskey? Is it stored in the warehouse of a distillery, or is it like another warehouse from the government or from a third company?
No, I mean all the warehouses are independently owned. They're not government owned, but they are bonded, secure warehouses. And they usually, someone like a Diageo has lots of different warehouses around Scotland. So they're the distiller, and on most occasions that same warehouse is in the same location as the distillery.
Okay.
How do we check the records to make sure they're sound? The proof is published. We also publish our management accounts once a year via the audit pages, and obviously it's there for inspection, so you can see. So the investors can see via their own their nickname. That's their own private nickname, and that's on that reconciliation. How do I buy an entire? Do I need to buy an entire cask? No, we do. We're not dealing in casks. We're dealing in units of measure. So our unit of measure is a liter of pure alcohol, so an LPA. So you can buy as little as one liter, one LPA. But we don't recommend obviously just buying one, because the storage fees of £3, the minimum storage fees of £3 per month. That's just not economical for a person to buy just one. Is there a minimum length of time to keep the whiskey? No, you can sell the whiskey at any time. However, as I said previously, you're unlikely to recoup your trading costs if you use wood for short-term investments. Again, how many currencies do we accept? So we accept 2 currencies right now, and that's GBP and USD, which is different from our sister company that obviously accepts more currencies. But at the moment, yes, we only accept 2. So the clients have an option to use their current bank account or current bank to transfer the money in GBP or USD, or use a currency conversion company, as I said, like a Revolut or a TransferWise or something like that.
Do you have any plans to include, for example, euros in the future?
Not yeah. At the moment, there's no plans to get the euro on. It really depends on what's happening with currencies and whether we can change the platform that way. It's certainly not in the plans, but we would just certainly look at it in the future, depending on how many more euro customers we have that would like to do that.
Okay, perfect.
So the realities of upsides and then the risks themselves. So from an upside perspective, I'll start with the upsides, which is always a better start. Historical data shows that the average net return of an 8-year-old whiskey bought from new and sold between the 2005 and 2014 is around 9.5% per annum. The whiskey is a commodity. Through time it gets better, and for a given age scarcer. So as the whiskey grows in age, obviously then the value it goes up as well. Scotch obviously has a wider international customer base than any other spirit, and its fortunes are not closely correlated to one national market, which is great. And the consensus from global consumption says that it's going to continue to grow at around 2% per annum in the medium term. As I said previously, because the UK government takes $3 billion a year in taxes on whiskey sales, it takes care to monitor those bonded warehouses very closely. So, and this keeps the storage system very honest, and insurance premiums quite low. Maturing whiskey is exceptionally unusual, and that being a physical product in which you can invest in without having to pay VAT, which is the goods and services taxes here in the UK. And whiskey offers you the way of storing wealth in a commodity, which being 100% physical operates independently from financial markets, which is a very big upside.
Yes. I think it's also interesting to see that, or to say it in the upsides for me, out of my perspective, that this tangible assets, now during this crisis, let's say, I think this is an investment what you can use during crisis and also after a crisis, or if there's like a boom cycle. Yes. Because, during a crisis, usually people tend also to drink more alcohol, maybe not the most expensive alcohol, but in the end, it's something, alcohol, I think they will be still drinking it. So I think it's an option to do it during crises also as an investment, and especially outside of a financial system, because it's also very interesting, right?
Yes, I think that no assets are completely recession proof, I suppose. But when we look at whiskey, there's what we call downside protection, and the fact that people are going to continue to drink whiskey. They might drink less, which is unlikely. They usually drink about the same. What we do see the differences during a recession is that if someone drank a bottle of whiskey a week, they still drink a bottle of whiskey a week, but maybe previously they might spend £30 on a bottle, and during a recession they might only spend 15 to 20 pounds in the long term. So what we see is a shift. We don't see we don't see less consumption. We just see a shift in what the pricing is.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And of course, that this kind of asset is like is helped also to diversify the portfolio, because
Yes.
it is complete outside from the financial market. So it's also a really good opportunity for diversification.
Yes, absolutely. And what we saw at the beginning. At the end of February, beginning of March, is that it showed that investors, even though we're not related to the stock market, it did show though that we were going to have investors that were going to be spooked by the global markets, even though we're not related to it. But then what we obviously saw that recovery very quickly once investors realized that we were completely separate to the financial markets.
Yes.
So from a risk perspective, obviously the first risk is that the market price of whiskey may fall, which is always obviously an important risk to know. The whiskey may become difficult to sell if it's become too old or too scarce. So, to be useful for a blend while not being thought good enough to be bottled as a single malt. That's, again, always a risk. The whiskey could be destroyed or stolen. In either case, as I said previously, it's fully insured, which would ordinarily represent a loss adjustment to true and fair value of the whiskey. This might not always be as much as what you thought it's worth. Obviously, that's important. And then there's the risk, obviously, with Whisky Invest Direct being very open. Obviously, we could go into be insolvent. But when you go to the website, you'll see that if we ever did become insolvent, that there's a thing called bailment, which is where you own the stock outright, and creditors cannot get their hands on it and do not have access to it. That is fully still owned by the investors. So the investors are always protected from that perspective.
So you are not having this whiskey on your balance sheet. It's if I buy my whiskey, 1 liter of whiskey, let's say, or 10 liters, then it's in my name. I'm the owner. So if you're getting bankrupt, they cannot get this asset because it's in my name and not in the name of a company, right?
It's not owned by us. It's owned by you. Exactly right. So the creditors do not have access to something that is owned by you, not owned by Whisky Invest Direct.
Okay, and in that case, let's say in case of insolvency, how the investors can sell then their LPAs or their whiskey? Because if, for example, probably the platform will not work anymore.
Yes, I think. Well, that would be up to the investors themselves, communicating with the distillery and getting access and selling their whiskey. Most likely, it would be the distillery would probably buy back the whiskey. But as I said, we can't offer those solutions to something that we don't exist anymore, if you know what I mean. Yeah. That is something that the investors would have to take up with the distilleries themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I've already sort of been through this, but this is really a quick synopsis of COVID-19 and what it happened to WID. So we did see we're obviously right in the middle of it. And we, to be honest, we don't know what is the long-term effects for the Scotch whisky industry. Like we don't know what the long-term effects of all the different industries around the world. So, for example, consumption may decline from the forecasted levels of the distilleries, and the distillation schedules could be likely to be amended. But we're not seeing any of that coming out of the industry. We obviously have a very close relationship with the industry. They're all saying the same thing, that they are seeing fluctuations. Some markets are down. Some markets are remaining up, with like the US, for example. And the US is the largest consumer of alcohol in the world. So, for the downsides we're seeing in some markets, we're still seeing some upsides in some of the larger markets. We obviously continue to operate as a marketplace. We obviously are matching buyers and sellers and offering very narrow spreads 24/7. So the prices on Whisky Invest Direct order board weakened, obviously, as I showed in the early stages of the crisis, on account of the clients selling for just over a brief period, but then rallied strongly in late March and early February. Late March, early April. So all the Whisky Investors Direct, so all our staff are now working remotely, and so we still offer the same customer support, but everyone's working obviously from remotely, which I presume that it's happening all over the world. So it did take us a couple of weeks to get used to everyone working remotely rather than in an office. We had sort of that we share with Bullion Vault, so we had 50 staff in that office. So it's obviously very different from everyone working from home, but I think everyone's now getting quite used to it, so which is good. So the fees. So the fees for Whisky Invest Direct are pretty clear. So we have a flat commission rate of 1.75%. We have a custody charge, so the storage fees of 15p per LPA, and we have a minimum custody charge of £3 per month. So on average, it's around 240 LPA that our investors need to own to reach the minimum. And then the funds wire fee, which is the third bit. So most UK withdrawals are free. However, if you need to pay our bank or remit funds to clients, there will be a fee. And then the last bit is a burglar alarm. This is optional, of course, but obviously we strongly recommend to our investors to have a burglar alarm to alert them of any withdrawals or changes to the account.
Anthony.
Yes.
One question: is there always the same storage fee? I mean, if it doesn't matter if it's a cheaper whiskey or a more expensive whiskey, the storage fee is always the same.
Exactly right.
Okay.
So it makes more sense to maybe invest then in a whiskey what is more expensive, because then it's the percentage of custody fees are lower, right? Because if I have let's say for $1 or £1 British, I buy a whiskey and I have 15 cents custody charge is 15% already, right? So if I have like a £3 per liter, it's like already divided by 3, so it's like 5%.
Exactly right. However, if like everything we were talking about at the beginning is that over in a short term, yes, but as the whiskey grows in value, obviously the 15p becomes less relevant whether it's a malt or a grain.
Okay.
But look, on the platform, we have 75% of our platform whiskies are malts, and only 25, well, not only 25, but 25% of our of the whiskies on the platform are grain.
But so, I have to pay it every year, right? The custody fee.
Every month.
Every month, yeah. But I mean, it's like the 15 pounds or cents per annum, so I have to pay that.
It's 0.0125 per month, but 15p per annum. Exactly right.
Okay.
So what we do also have is we have a thing called a bulk trade bid, which is when the industry comes back to us and wants to buy the whiskey back from our investors. So we've had 2 of them already this year. The first one was the Ben Rennis 2012 in March, and that was quite interesting because it was right in the middle of the beginning of COVID when the industry came in and asked to buy the whiskey. So it was really good and showed that the industry had both confidence in us, confidence in the platform to go ahead and to buy some whiskey off us. It wasn't a massive buy. It was only 10,000 litres, but it showed that the annualized returns for our investors was 4.7%. The second was a Kalila. So we have 56,000 litres on the platform, and the buyer wanted to buy all 56,000 of the whiskey, but only our investors only sold 31,800 to the company. So we've still got 25,000 litres sitting on the platform, which is still good. I mean, it's a really great whiskey too, the Kalila. So it showed that our investors thought that there was still value to be gained in the long term. But I think the important thing was that the initial purchase price was $267 when we bought it, and then when we sold it at $551. So the annualized returns for our investors was just over 24%.
Oh, significant high.
Yeah, really. I mean, and obviously the Kalila is a very strong whiskey, but the first. So what we also had is we had competing bids. So the first bid we had was for £4.89, and then we had a second bid for £5.15, and then the third industry bid was $5.51. So it was really interesting to see how the industry valued the whiskey, and it showed that the pricing on our platform also is great value for the industry to come and buy.
Yes, Anthony, there's a star at net of costs, but I cannot find the star. So maybe you can explain what.
So the net. So sorry, I didn't put it in there. I should have. Sorry. So the net of costs is all this is the storage fees and commission fees.
So
Okay.
they are already included. There was already
included. So it's net of those costs. So there was 20. Like it was basically it was a pure profit after costs of 24.6.
Wow.
Yeah. It was great. It was really great value for the investors and also great value for the industry. And it showed that, as I said, it showed the pricing on our platform is in line with what the industry wants. Right. Okay. Yeah. So, we do see ourselves, we support the distilleries as well. So obviously we help them free up working capital when we buy a new filling from them. It means they've got leaner stock holdings that are on their P&L. We have ongoing income that we give them through the storage revenues, and it's a way for the distillers and the brand owners to trade stock between each other and in quite a cost-effective and efficient way. And there's a lot of trust and transparency because they can go straight to our platform and see all the different pricing that is available of all the different whiskies to buy, and then sufficient scale and liquidity. But we're no threat to the industry status quo as yet. So I suppose the question is Whisky Invest Direct right for you guys, for your investors? So the first thing is, you understand there's no guaranteed future returns for investing in maturing Scotch, but with its historical performance, and we expect that obviously to continue. Okay, I like owning tangible goods. With no counterparty risk, with the ability to trade at near wholesale prices. You're looking to diversify your portfolio away from shares and property, and you understand you're investing in maturing Scotch sold by the litre. It's stored in a barrel in a bonded insured warehouse in Scotland, and we're not involved in either rare bottled whiskey or cask programs. Okay, you invest in the long term, but you can obviously exit at any time. And you understand that while storage and transaction costs are a factor to be considered, if the historical performance is the guide, then returns after costs show the maturing Scotch as a profitable investment. And you can buy as little as one LPA at a time, but also know that with access to this wholesale market, you can buy thousands of LPA as well if you want. And you own that the Whisky Invest Direct is owned by the same company that owns Bullion Vault. They are our sister company that have been around for over 15 years. So next steps would be pretty simple. So opening an account, getting that account validated, and then funding the account, and then going ahead and buying the whiskey. Okay.
So, are there some fees to open the account?
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Jose.
Are there some fees involved in opening the account?
There's no fees involved in opening the account.
Okay.
And for validate the account, which documents they have to prove? Do we have to prove also your address, or is it just enough to have a passport or ID, government ID? Yeah,
there needs to be a photo ID, either a passport or a valid driver's license. Both of those are, and then the second ID is we need proof of address, whether it's a bank account. Bank statement. You don't need to show obviously your balance, but we need to see the bank account number, name, address, all that sort of thing that meets up with the same information from the passport or driver's license.
Okay.
And yes, very good. And then so the offer today for your investors is we're reducing the commission rate for 12 months. From today until the 15th of August 2021, the investors have 30 days to register and validate their account for the discount to be applicable. So the normal rate, if an investor put in £1,000, the normal rate they'd be paying, the commission rate would be around £17.50, and with the rate for today for the discount, you'd be paying £12.50. Okay, but the important thing is to make sure that the link is used. Otherwise, we won't recognize that it's an investor from your platform.
Yeah, so we also made the short link because this link is quite long, and maybe for you as a viewer is difficult to type it in. And so we was just making this link in a short link on the link when you type it in your browser, goodbyematrix.com/WID, so WID for Whiskey Invest Direct. So then it will directly put you to this link and you come to the web page. But I think also, Anthony, on the web page, when you make an account, you can also select their referred by, right? And then you can write their GoodbyeMatrix or Internationalize Now. And then you would
exactly right. But it still means someone manually in our business has to double check it. But if you actually use the link, then it automatically goes through.
Okay.
I think the last point is just on the website itself. We have, over the last 5 years, we've gathered all the information that investors could potentially ask. So although I've given the presentation today, the best advice I can give is to go to the website and go and all the questions are asked there and answered. So all the information is already there on the website. So that's the best platform. Although we'll do a Q&A and so forth and ask as many questions as you need, the best place to go is to the platform itself.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
So you have more slides, or is it over your presentation?
That's it.
Okay, perfect. Great. Yeah, thanks so much. It was a great presentation. Of course, we also collected some questions before, and we have also here a very interesting question from one viewer. Maybe we start with that because it's very interesting what he was asking. So he's asking, there are, let's say, 500 LPA in a cask owned by different people.
Yes.
How is the ownership after about 10 years when some percentages of a whiskey is in cask evaporated? What role does evaporation play anyway?
Yeah, so that's it's what we call angel share, which is when on average about 2% of the whiskey is then evaporates per annum. It can change between 2% and 3 and 4%, but on average it's around 2. So what happens is then the distillery pays us back in whiskey for anything that is missing. So what happens is they don't normally do. It's called a regauge. Is when they then open the casks and find and figure out how much whiskey has evaporated. So what happens then is the distilleries themselves give us that extra whiskey back. So the investors are not getting any less whiskey or any less whiskey ownership.
Okay.
So I have a question about the trading platform. It is mainly peer-to-peer, this trading platform, or for example, if a buyer wants to sell and there is, or an investor wants to sell their position and there are no buyers at the moment, do you also sell back, like a company buy back that?
So we buy whiskey. We buy whiskey back if there's no buyers. Absolutely.
Okay.
So then there was a question before we had from one newsletter subscriber. He was writing me, what would you recommend, or what is the best, how long should you hold your whiskey? Because you said, okay, you could invest now, let's say, and sell it next day. But of course you have to be this fee involved and all these things, so it makes no sense to do it. So what do you would say, what is a good period of time of minimum investment so that the people have a time frame if they decide to invest in it? Because you said it's like more a long-term investment. So that means you have to look for your portfolio, how much money you can give free for the next, let's say, 3 years, when you would say, like, this is the best time for minimum holding the whiskey. But
it's a very difficult question to answer because every investor has a different perception of what long-term means. There's a very interesting document on the website called the Moonshine Plan, which was done by Paul Tustain, who's one of the original guys who set up the business. And what it recommends to investors, and again, it's just recommendations, is that investors invest a certain amount of money per annum every year for 6 years. And then they start gaining those returns. And then the older whiskies that they bought at the original stage, they start selling. And then they buy new whiskies again at the cheaper price. So what they do is they have an ongoing income that they can get. And then what they do is they then reinvest older whiskies back into new filled whiskies to keep that income going. So I can't really answer the question of when's the best time, because every investor is different. But I would say that, you know, if the whiskies are getting an 8% per annum investment increase, then, you know, investors can work that out as to what is the best time to buy and sell and to stay in the program. I mean, the Moonshine Plan, I really recommend as a good read, because of what it does, it also shows a profit statement and shows what you do with the whiskies, you know, and when to buy and get out. But again, it's just a recommendation on what would be, I suppose, an investor's plan on how long they're going to stay in for a whiskey. You know, we would always say that, you know, from an investor perspective, you want to be in for at least a minimum of 3 to 5 years.
This document that you are talking about is only in the members area, or you can also find it in the website?
You know, it's not for members. It's for anyone who wants to go on the website and go and have a look. It's in the section about whiskey and about us. There's two documents. One is long-term investment in whiskey, which is again written by Paul, and the second one is the Moonshine Plan, which shows that. Just shows what the investment plan that he recommends to follow and that he does himself.
Okay, perfect. We will find the links and maybe put the direct links under the video later on, so people can just access it directly.
We have here also the same question now. I think with that, it will be already answered, this question, because he asked how long.
Yeah, 3 to 5 years, we would say, is a minimum. Yeah.
But I think, you know, I like this idea. Of course, we cannot make any investment advice, as you said. You have to make your own decisions when you invest in something as a viewer. But I like this way that you say, okay, every year I buy for 6 years the same whiskey, let's say, and then after 3 years I start selling something. So then I build myself like a pension, a whiskey pension, right? Because after 6 years I can then every year.
Exactly right. That's the whole plan that Paul put together like that as a recommending it was that, let's say you put in £1,000 a year, and then by year 6 you then don't need to put in any more money. You then take the returns and take the older whiskey, sell it, take those profits yourself, and then continue to then put the £1,000 back in that you took from the sales of the whiskies from year 1. I'm explaining it badly, but it's much easier to read on the Moonshine Plan.
Yes. Okay. So you as a viewer just read the Moonshine Plan. So then Moonshine you maybe
exactly.
Yes. So we have here also again from this guy another question. Can you say something about how to choose the right distillery to invest in? What would be a proper approach?
Good question. I think that, as I said, earlier on, the best thing is to look at the information that we provide on the website, and then do their own research, Google it, find out about the distilleries. We've got some very popular distilleries like Kalila, with Bunnahabhain, that are Islay whiskies, which are obviously big, quite peaty distilleries and peaty whiskies. But then we have others like Bladnoch Estate and Ardnamurchan that are smaller, much smaller type distilleries that are, I would call them more boutique. So it's really, again, it's really up to the investors to what they're looking for. Whether they're looking for a big corporate like Kalila that's owned by Diageo, or they want to invest in maybe more of a smaller distillery like a Bladnoch Estate or Ardnamurchan.
Yeah, I think
it's
you
like
have to make
your
own research, right? So that's the most important, that you make your own research. And I think this was also what I wanted to ask you. Can you recommend any book about whiskey? Or I think there's some starters here, and they have maybe not that much idea. That was maybe even not thinking about it, that you can use whiskey as an investment, like wine. There's also the possibility to use wine as an investment. But of course, you should understand this asset class more. So maybe you have like a famous book about whiskey. What you can recommend? What's coming to your mind right now?
The problem is there's hundreds of books that come out every month on whiskey, so I can't recommend one. I would say the best book to read is Google. because there's so much information online about every distillery. It's just unbelievable when you Google about whiskey that you're going to get thousands of pieces of information, because you do have a lot of commentators, you do have a lot of critics, you do have a lot of journalists that are involved. We do, so on our website, we produce a news article every week. So every Friday we produce a news article that's written by some independent journalists that we pay. We don't talk about Whiskey Invest direct, because we think that that's sort of, it's not very professional for us to be doing news about our own business. But what we do is we talk about the industry. And we don't just talk about Scotch, we talk about American whiskey. You see articles on American whiskey, Japanese whiskey, in fact Polish whiskey now. The big thing is now Poland is producing their own whiskies as well. So what we do is we sort of see ourselves as more of an industry type commentator, but don't try and push our own business when it comes to that.
Yeah, but that is also a way also to push the business, giving a lot of value to the investors, that they can also get up to date what is going on with the industry, what are maybe good opportunities in the future. And of course, it's like in every investment, everyone has to make their own due diligence and invest time also in learning about what they are investing in, so to make the proper decisions for themselves, right? Because every investor has their own profile.
Exactly. And I think the thing for us is that we believe that the more information about the industry, the better it is.
Yes.
For
sure. So we have another question. When I send money to Whiskey Invest Direct, is there a fee for the money on the account of Whiskey Direct?
No, there's no fees that we charge. However, it would depend on what bank you're using, whether they would charge. So that's something that the investors would need to check with their own bank. If you when you withdraw the money, again, we don't charge, but there may be some currency charges and so forth from banks. So that's something that the investors would need to look at from their own side, but we don't.
During the presentation, you were talking also about TransferWise.
Yes.
Because TransferWise is a multi-currency account, so investor can, if they're in the Eurozone, which are mostly our customers, they can. A lot of them, they have also TransferWise. You can have like a USD account or a GBP account, so you can like get both without commission. I guess.
And we don't have a particular relationship with any one currency conversion company. We obviously use Revolut and so forth as well. But yes, we have all the instructions on the website. If you want to use a TransferWise or a Revolut, all the information is on the website on how to set that up as well.
Perfect.
Yeah. Then we have the last question here. Do you also offer physical delivery? For example, if I decide to do an independent bottling line of the malts I own?
Yes, we don't recommend it because it's a very expensive exercise. But if a client really wanted to bottle their own whiskey, we will absolutely do that for them. The important thing to remember, it is not a cheap exercise. It is around £1,500 to do that we charge. And secondly, the investor would be paying VAT, and they would be paying their duty and bond costs. So duty is very expensive as well. So it's around £9 per LPA. I need to double check that, but it's not a cheap exercise to go through, and that's why we don't recommend it. We recommend that they sell the whiskey back to the trade, back to the distillers themselves, and the investors don't have to go through that process. I mean, we are not set up to do that. That's not what we're here for. I would recommend to any, this is probably not helping my own business, but if someone wants to do that, I would go to a cask investment program.
Okay. Yeah, Anthony, it was a great talk with you. Very amazing. So we have all questions answered here so far. So you as an potential investors, if you are interested in Whiskey Invest Direct, and if you want to take action and want to fund your account and maybe do this investment as we said already, you get a reduced commission rate of 0.5%. And the only thing what you have to do with that is just to register the account under this URL, goodbyeMatrix.com/WID. Or if you register your account, you can also they're referred by and then GoodbyeMatrix or internationalize now. And then they will know, and then you will get this commission rate discount. And yeah, Anthony, thank you so much for this great content. We have also here from the viewer the feedback, great content and insights. Thank you so much. And yeah, it was very interesting.
You're
also
welcome.
For me to see. Maybe I will also now invest in whiskey.
Yes,
We'll be very happy to welcome you. The as I said, the two things is that whatever other questions you have, go to the website. There's just a ton of information there. And secondly, tomorrow morning, our customer service team will be back on board. If you have any questions, you can go to the customer service team and talk to them that way, and they'll be able to answer any questions. I'm actually going to be, we've got one of our staff that are on holiday next week, so I'm actually going to be on helping out on customer service, so I might be one of the people that they talk to.
Yes, perfect.
perfect.
We have already feedback from another one. Thank you so much. I'm already a customer.
That's great news.
Yes. So here, also another person said, great info. Thanks so much. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you so much, Anthony. It was amazing.
Thanks, guys.
Talk.
Yeah, thank you again for your time, Anthony, and
No
enjoy
problem.
your Sunday.
I will. I need to take a dog for a walk. Yeah.
Okay, so enjoy. Thank you very much.
See you guys. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.